This is like you were addressing in your article. I can't remember what the phraseology was. Was it first order consequences and second order consequences or something like that?
Yeah, so that was one of the things I was addressing with consequentialism is in the sense of how far down do you go with the consequences? So in this instance, we have a first and second order consequence. Um, so you either have the fact that you've tortured someone and saved the life, or you don't torture someone and a million people have died. So the problem with a lot of consequentialist moral theories is how far down the line do you actually go? Because if you're just dealing with first order consequences, then, like, for example, the trolley problem is really easy. You save the five and kill the one. But then if you all of a sudden add in a second order of consequences, well, actually, unknown to you at the time, those five people were all rapists and murderers, and they've gone on to kill and rape five people each. So all of a sudden, your action, if you go to the second order consequence, becomes an immoral action. Um, just without you even knowing it. And I think they actually highlighted this quite well in The Good Place as well, where they went to things of, just buying a bag of tomatoes from your local shop ended up causing all of this massive negative impact, and you got minus 400 points, whereas before doing the same action would earn you X points, that sort of thing.
But it would also apply to this, would it not? Because the first order would be whether to torture or not. The second order consequence is the people dying.
Yep. But then from there, what do you do? Well, third order consequences, actually half of those million people went on to get into some form of violent act. So, yeah, I mean, that's a figure I pulled out of my arse. I don't know what the actual percentage of people that get involved in violent acts are off the top of my head. But even if it was,
Hopefully
say,
less than 50%.
I would very much
Hopefully
hope,
quite a lot less than
yeah,
50%.
unless you're in Croydon.
I'm in Swindon, so
Yeah, pretty much the same thing.
yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean that's the problem. So how far down the consequences do you go? Because you can't go down that sort of infinite line of consequences, but in a certain respect you're expected to. So and also with consequentialist moral theories, they don't even take intent into account. I'm intending to do this good thing, but oh, I fucked up and it went wrong. Oh, you've done an immoral action. Well, is that fair?
Well,
I,
that's one of the other kind of criticisms you could make about this. Um, Under consequentialism, as long as you save those people, you have committed a moral action. But if the terrorist is strong enough to resist the torture, then the people will still die, and therefore the torture becomes an immoral action because it led to disastrous outcomes. So the question then becomes: can you be moral by accident? Can you be moral through luck?
From
Can't
a
argue that no. Morality can't be determined by luck. It
it
is
has to
either
be an
moral.
active choice.
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
from a purely consequentialist perspective, you might make the argument that you can do it by luck. Because if the consequences is the only thing that matters, then if I was trying to shoot my wife and accidentally missed her and killed a burglar across the street and saved a family from getting killed or whatever, then all of a sudden, under a purely consequentialist moral theory, I'd have done a moral action. And doesn't that sit wrong with you as well? It does with me.
It does.
There's the other, there's the kind of antithesis of that as well, which was addressed when I went to a talk on psychopathy, where if you put a poison sandwich in the fridge at work and nobody ate it, the consequence is, well, there isn't a consequence. So it wasn't immoral to put the sandwich there. So there's a kind of antithesis of a good thing happening by accident or a bad thing not happening by accident.
Yeah, exactly. And it just seems intuitively incorrect to say that we can be moral or immoral, luckily, or
Mm.
down
Yeah.
to the right circumstances happening. Another one for consequentialism, especially in the weak sense, is imagine that you're torturing the terrorist and he has 5 children, say 5 young daughters aged between 4 and 8 or 4 and 9. Now, you line them up and you torture them and you shoot one of them to get the terrorist to talk. If the terrorist talks, you shooting those 5 children is a good thing. But there's something about shooting 5 innocent children to get a terrorist to talk that sort of changes the scenario slightly.
Yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
think that one highlights it even more, because I think a lot of people will go, well, screw the terrorist. He was going to kill 1 million people. He deserves it. But actually, as you mentioned, 5 kids. It could just be one child. It doesn't matter. There is at least one child in this picture that is completely innocent, has no idea of her father's wrongdoings, and is going to be killed by you. And maybe even tortured first as well, because torturing her is torture for the father, and it's probably a more effective torture for the father, to be fair. And all
So.
Sorry?
You'd hope so.
And so all of a sudden you suddenly go, oh, hang on, yeah, no, I even if you were saying that this guy deserves it, suddenly you're thinking his kids don't deserve it. But it's still a lesser of 2 evils. Killing these 5 innocent children to save 1 million people.
Which is going to include a fuckload of innocent children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I wanted to ask about, just so with like pure consequentialism, do we actually have to consider the consequences of other people's actions, or do we only have to consider the consequences of ours?
That's a good question. I was looking into this in writing my article the other day, and there are
If we
different
only have
takes
to
on it.
look into the consequences of ours, then torturing the terrorist is always wrong, because 1 million people dying is a consequence of his action, not us.
There's also the other end of that stick as well, is the fact, like I was talking about with the trolley problem, where you've saved the 5 people, but they all go on to rape and murder. That is them taking their own action. It's almost like the dominoes reset. So when someone else makes an active choice, not one that they're forced into, someone else makes an active choice, it's not your fault. So
that is slightly different here, because that would be them acting after you. In this case, with the bomb's already set up. This is an action that has already happened. So that would change the parameters and way you figure that, surely.
but you're thrown into a situation where you can save them or not. So your choice there, it's your action. So your choice is to save them or not. So regardless of what they've done, the fact that they've set it up is clearly an immoral action in the first instance. But your choice in this point is to save them or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Once you become aware of it, it becomes an action that you can either ignore or take. Think of the people who respond with, I would just do nothing in the case of the trolley problem, because as far as they're concerned, that absolves them of any responsibility. But they have made a choice to not act. So through their inaction, the 5 people will die, whereas they could have taken an action and saved 4 people.
Yeah.
And it's the same kind of thing with the terrorist thing. The people who run the city know about it. Once they know about it, they become morally obliged to act on it, or not act on it and let 1 million people die, meaning that the consequences of their inaction has led to 1 million people dying.
Yep, that makes sense.